Test. Okay. I wanted to do a video before I fix this error because I think it's kind of interesting. So let's go over to the hamburger stand. So before I had this error where the conveyor belt, that every time you put an item on, it's not started yet, but what it would do would convey everything along. Even though I have this in my hand right now, it would still kind of push it, and slide with it. Because the way this conveyor belt works is there's a trigger that kind of any object, the colliders of the objects interact with it, it will apply the math to move it along the collider. So I kind of spent the day researching. It's like, how do I tell the difference between objects? And it's actually kind of somewhat of a difficult problem because all objects in this universe are built on the same object. So anytime you try to say like game ID or well, the first thing I did was like type of, like you type, but they all have the same type. It's game object. And then there's a gamer ID, but it did not give me what I needed to know. And then I'm doing things by name, but the name, there's sometimes where like the burger and then there's like the clone of the burger. So it'll say like burger clone. So the name isn't exact right. So basically I'm kind of doing some string math that's saying like start burger, like if you have the word like start burger in it. But I can't use that, and I'll show you. I have to do one more modification to get this to work. So this, it's not like there, but the problem is that, and this totally makes sense, is that this, it's, even if this object interacts with this other object, it's not part of that object. So it's like it needs to become that. But then what, probably the real solution to this thing, oh, this is kind of interesting too, is the way this rigid, like again, like the physics, how this physics work is that it still interacts with stuff with it. So if that's ever needed, it's kind of cool. But the way to really probably fix this is that like this component that's the burger really needs to be probably every component the burger is going to become. And this kind of solves two problems. One, like when you put the cheese on the burger, it starts, like they become one thing. But then it also solves, my aunt Dorothy actually had a good idea, and she's right. Is like when you put the cheese on, you want it to melt. It needs to change when it's part of the burger. And I was looking at this other cooking game, and it kind of acts similar. It's a cooking Counterfight, which is a nice punny name, but it's more of a Japanese like game with soup. And it was just like, oh yeah, like when you put the stuff in, it needs to kind of change what it would be in the bowl. And I think this stuff kind of works the same way. So the way it's probably going to solve is that when I interact, and I'm probably going to do this right afterwards. I just thought this error was kind of interesting to document, and this also fixes this too. That's kind of interesting. So, like again, those rigid bodies or the box colliders are working. I don't have interactivity on the burger, the stuff, but I can still put stuff. Whoa, what happened there? That it still kind of deals with it, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, so it kind of solved me two things. It's like probably what's happening is like I can test these colliders with each other when they're like, yes, these things are collided. What I'm going to do is destroy this object and then create like the melted cheese on the burger. So, and then instead of like this burger component, I'm going to make another component, like an empty, again, going back to that game object, that around it. And so then it's like I'm going to create that instance of that cheese and stuff in it. And then going back to the collider of this is that I'm going to detect that object and stuff, so that object's going to be fine. And I think that's going to solve that problem. Another thing I probably have to do is change the size. I think it's kind of funny being this big size. I don't think it's viable because it's just like I don't even have like space for everything I need. And I might need to do is actually put stuff in different places and stuff. Another thing the counterfight had, which is probably good and probably adds a little bit to the game, is not only does it have the front station, but it also has stuff behind the other station. I don't know what causes that. It's like some kind of rotation. Like sometimes when I'm in the suite, I can get it to do too. But yeah, this is kind of like those actually stand pretty. The physics or whatever. With it. This actually doesn't have it. It does because it falls, so it does have the rigid body with it. But it's kind of cool that it stands just like that. I don't know. Yeah, it just the tolerance or whatever on it. So yeah, I wanted to document this. I'm going to try to fix it tonight. I'm gonna have to rework some stuff, but yeah, that's what I kind of spent my idea. And then also too, another thing I learned today, kind of researching actually two things, was that if you wanted to switch the parent, like my kind of original idea is like, when I put this, like make that a parent, which I could still do. But it probably almost makes sense to instantiate a piece of cheese without the interactivity stuff on the hot dog. But that to switch the parent is actually pretty easy. There is just literally a property name parent, and you just pass the new game object you want it to be a parent of, and it becomes, and you even see that in the interface as well. Another thing, and then the final thing that I learned today, which I swear I've done before, but I didn't remember until I had to look it up today, was that debugging. So it's like when you want to like put a breakpoint, you put a breakpoint in Visual Studio, but then you click what was it, continue in Unity, I think. It's like an option that shows up in the Visual Studio, and then that will start your movie, and then it'll look for that breakpoint. If you just start Unity, you get at breakpoints and stuff, and it's not going to hit it. So yeah, there was some older code I was looking at where when I was trying to figure out how to compare the things, and it just wasn't detecting, and I was kind of going crazy. But once I figured out the breakpoint and the debugging, it fixed it. Let's see here. There was one more thing. I was looking at this. I don't think I need this, but somebody has done this, and it kind of makes sense. It's kind of the generic way to do this in languages is states. So it's like, do I make the burger like a different? It still may make sense. Like when I do this, I make that collide, and then I change the state to the burgers, but that may not be the best way of doing this because with this game and stuff like that, there's going to be special orders. So somebody may not have pickles or whatever. So it's like, do you make a state like with everything with pickles or whatever? The state thing may get kind of complicated. So it maybe almost switches. So yep, I'm gonna start working on that. Probably should get a little bit more done today, but anyway, that's where stuff's at. Till tomorrow.